All right. Hey, ladies. So first of all, thank you. You guys have been doing some amazing work. And it sounds like you're not new to this, right? Like you've been in the work. One of the things that I kind of wanted to start the conversation out with was, when was your aha moment? When did you notice like your specific why? And then the second part of that question is, what made you actually, like, what inspired you to actually take that public and become more of a voice for your community that you had identified in that aha moment?
I can start us
We can
off.
start with Hadi. Sorry, I'll
Okay.
I'll do a little direction for you guys.
Gosh, I think so. I failed to mention in my intro that I spent over 25 years in corporate, and like Tiffany, I was also in financial services. So I spent time at JP Morgan Chase, BNY Mellon, and I was within the tech space. So then I also worked for Accenture, Salesforce, Cloudflare. So I was in a lot of major tech organizations for over 25 years, and I feel like. And I was also part of ERG communities, usually the Latinx women ERGs. And I feel like over time, I developed a point of view, but it's really hard sometimes in corporate to be, to be that truth teller or to be that disruptor, because, it's not always welcome. Like people in corporate usually like things to be like pretty, predictable, status quo, like don't rock the boat a little too much, don't rock it too much type thing. But I feel like over time, it was like undeniable. Like I was like, I have to tell people like what this experience has been like what it's been like to, especially when I first started my career in the 90s, to be the only Latina in so many rooms, and what that felt like for me, and what it did to me, like how I, maybe silenced my voice, or like didn't say the things I wanted to say because I didn't always feel safe to say them. And then how over time that changed. And I would say, my last corporate role was head of equality at Slack. It was a major tech company. I was, overseeing the ERGs there. And I feel like by then my voice was loud and clear. And I knew that I had something really important that I wanted to share with other Latinas and women of color. And so when I got laid off in 2023 and I started my own speaking business and I started writing and, doing all the things, that was when I was like, this is the perfect opportunity to say, like share what I've learned, but also say those really, maybe a little bit provocative things that I really couldn't say in the corporate space. Like, this is my opportunity to say those things in the way that I want to say them, in my voice. To the people that I want to cater to in particular. And then that just started me down a whole path that was really exciting.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I think the psychological safety piece of it is very interesting, that you found more psychological safety in a public arena than you did in some like more enclosed, smaller communities. So that's a very interesting concept.
That's right.
Tiffany, do you want to let us know when your aha moment struck and how that kind of progressed into where you are now?
Yeah. So for those who are unfamiliar with my story, I was involved in a car accident when I was 9. My dad unfortunately passed away and I became disabled. So I have both apparent and non-apparent disabilities. One of my arms is paralyzed, and I also live with PTSD. And for the decade plus after the car accident, I actually didn't tell anyone about it or about my dad, and I tried to hide my disability by wearing long sleeves. And it wasn't until my final year at college, I had actually just come back from this internship at Goldman. And when I was an intern there, that was actually when I got introduced to my first disability community, right? And it just so happened that being in a corporate space introduced me to the fact that you could find community and pride in these aspects of your identity that maybe people have told us we should blend in or hide or feel shame about. So I like to think that college for me was the best playground for growth. It was the place where I think I started to find my voice and a little bit more of my confidence. So that was in 2009. I think and I still remember the date. It was October 22nd, 2009. And that was the first time I ever shared the story publicly of the car accident. And I remember that because it was the first time I felt like I was taking ownership over my own story rather than letting other people co-opt it. Now, I want to share that I do think that having I don't know if we call it context or situational awareness does matter. So then I went into these corporate spaces where I think they did have restrictions around how much you could share on social media and other things like that. But I was also able to, I guess, find my own voice, even as at a junior level at those different places. But I agree with Hadi as well. I think I call them like receipts after having this work experience and knowing the power and value of my voice and my story. Then now being on my own, I have felt more comfortable being outspoken about it. But I will say my last corporate type job was very much about getting its employees to really share the company's wins as well. So I started to see a shift around 2014 to 2016, where the companies that I was working at were really celebrating us having our own personal brands because it would help elevate them as well.
Yeah, and I think that is something that is slowly trickling in, right? People are starting to actually acknowledge the benefit of actually like shining more of a light on the individuals who are actually building the company. But with that, people do have to be open to hearing the different perspectives, right? Because we are not a monolith and there are a lot of different perspectives. So there's a whole nother teams of people that companies probably don't even have that would actually properly prepare companies for a more equal sharing publicly. I've definitely been at the companies where, you don't have the ability to even post, about what the work that you're doing or anything publicly. And so there is definitely, I think, a shift happening. One of the things that I also noticed that you guys that was like a key theme between what the both of you ladies said was in certain spaces you felt silenced, and now you actually have the platform to like shout as loud as you want. And there's like a whole transition and process that is like developed through that, right? I want to dive into the first kind of component of that, and that is like when you're actually creating the content. So there's different ways to go about this, right? You can say, I am creating for myself. A lot of times you hear people say that they say, I'm creating for the, 10-year-old Denise or the 12-year-old Tiffany. A lot of times people, that's their mind and that's who they're creating for. And they're creating for members in their community who are following their footsteps. I'd love to know from the two of your perspectives, who is actually top of mind when you're creating content? Is it the community? Is it, I'm speaking on behalf of my community to broaden our reach for our message? Tiffany, let's go ahead and start with you on that question.
Yeah, I saw someone else give this piece of advice where she said, whenever I write a post, I write at the beginning, like, hey, friend, and then you write the post as though you're talking to a friend. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you have it like targeted in that way, and then you go in and you delete that first line, and then that's the post and you go through and edit it. And I like that perspective because I feel like we are in the attention economy, right? And so especially on a platform like LinkedIn, where we're seeing a transition from it previously being mostly job updates and, hey, here's this achievement, to sharing more, here are things that I'm building, or here's what I learned from this experience. I think that having like an idea of who that target person is, so rather than being like one to many, it's like one to one. And then the hope is that one-to-one, as you're writing it to that friend, resonates with a lot more people outside of that too.
Yeah, I think one of the things about the one-to-one, it actually puts you in the mindset of the communication style as well, right? So if I say I'm talking to Hadi, then I know how I'm going to actually, like, it kind of instantly does like a mental shift in your actual communication style in those messages as well. Thank you for sharing that. Hadi, do you want to share?
Yeah, I would say I totally started my LinkedIn content like that. Like it was directed at, I didn't realize it at the time. Like it wasn't so much intentional, but it was like for my friends, like for people that like connected with me. And I made some assumptions. Like I literally would say, hola familia, Hadi here. And it was just like, hey family, it's me again. And I'm like, here's what I wanted to share with you today. And I wanted, at that time, and I think even still today, a lot of it was adding value. So it's like, here's something I read, here's something cool that I came across. Like, I just think about, like, even yesterday, I posted about a video that I watched on the plane on Roberto Clemente. And I was like, all this stuff I found out about this man. Like, how do we not know this about him? Like, it's been, I don't know how many years since this man died. And I'm coming to, find out these really important gems about this human being today. And I had to share this with you because if you're part of a Latinx ERG or Black ERG, you should totally be watching this with your members and you should be talking about it. There's so many lessons we can learn from him. And so it's really, I'm being a resource. Like, that's how I started off, was just trying to be a resource, trying to be just someone very like accessible, so that like, hey, it's me, Hadi again. It's like super accessible. And actually it's funny because when people would meet me offline, they'd be like, oh, I follow you on LinkedIn. And they'd be like, really like if they knew me, and I'm like, but I don't know you. So like, who are you again? Because they felt like they knew me, like we were like best friends, because that's how I came across. And it's genuine. I feel like completely, authenticity is something that people aspire to talk about, the whole nine. And I feel like from the very start, that's the space that I played in. Like, I'm just gonna be myself. And to your point, because in the last question, you were talking a little bit about corporations and whether they want to give us permission to talk about things, and how do they influence our brand and how we show up. And I really tried my best to just be Hadi. Like, I was Hadi who happened to work at this place, but I was first Hadi more than anything, and didn't really lean on my role or the company that I worked at very much, because if that changed, I still wanted to be Hadi, the same person that they trust, that they go to for resources, that they look up to and say, like, she's the one that's telling us the real deal, or whatever the case might be. So it started that way. And then now when I try to reach a broader audience, as someone who's a business owner, it's harder. It's really hard. I'm going to admit. And Tiffany, I don't know what it's like for you, but when as a business owner, I feel like sometimes I take away that really fun side of me, and I'm like, hey, I can help your ERG, hire me. And it just doesn't come across the same way. So it's, it's a balance. And it's also like, I think, a work in progress, trying to learn how to still be that fun, authentic person that comes across the screen, but also, could be looked at by like a CHRO or a head of people, and they can still also relate to me and see the value in bringing me to their team, to present to their team, or to talk to members of their team. Yeah.
No, I love what you said about, like, we're all wearing multiple different hats, and we all kind of like code switch at all times. But when you've had the opportunity to publicly be yourself, now you kind of have to figure out, like, how do I actually balance all of that, and actually acknowledge, like, okay, some of the certain ways that I might say something might actually be learned behavior. Some of them are just appropriate for different settings, right? And so even though you might be saying the same thing, or your message doesn't actually change, having a clear understanding of the different ways and the diverse ways that you actually need to communicate that to get across to who's listening, I think is very keen as you continue to grow your platform. And I've seen that you guys both are like, do that very well, right? You write a book, the words on the page are the words on the page, right? But I'm sure as you take that book into different spaces, whether that be like a local bookstore or a TEDx stage, you're going to kind of like modify that slowly over time. So this next section actually kind of gets into how you make some of those decisions. It's called This or That. And it really talks about like the consistency piece, right? So I'm going to start with a question about consistency, and then we'll kind of, go through each of your guys' process on how you are making those decisions for your platform, because there's not a right or wrong answer in any of this, right? That's, I think, the common theme. But so Hadi, we'll start with you for this one. But what does consistency actually mean for you when it comes to your platform, your content creation?
Yeah, I want to be out there all the time. I want people to look forward to reading my content. I try to diversify, like, hey, today I'm going to give you a tip. Tomorrow I'm going to remind you about, maybe one of my shows. I'm going to maybe talk about like an upcoming event. Like, I have a book event this Saturday, come through. So I try to keep it like really like a nice variety. And that's often my goal, like as I plan the calendar. And, I know that's like probably a question for a lot of people. It's like, do you have a calendar? I have had a calendar. When my book launched, I had a 90-day, 120-day calendar, because I had to. because I was like, it was all like, getting people excited for the launch, book reveal, who's endorsing the book, who's my book coach, whatever. So that was necessary at that time. Now I kind of do it like week by week loosely. And also because I know I have this platform, as I think of things, I'm like, oh, I should share that on LinkedIn, and there might be some times where like I have half an hour and I'm like, what are some things I want to talk about? Because, sometimes like you get bored of talking about the same thing over and over again. The book is one of them. Like you're like, I can't even talk about this book anymore, but you have to. So it's like, we're going to figure it out. We're going to find other ways to talk about the book, or other angles, if you will, or like, how you're going to spin things. And I think you mentioned that earlier. It's just like, sometimes different audience, you're going to talk about it in a different way. But I do keep like a tentative calendar-ish. I like having a variety. I like, talking about my business and like how I can help people, like reminding people of that. I think that's super important. But I also like offering like free resources, or, that type of thing, like tips and tricks, like, hey, did you know this thing? And, I've done podcasts and lives all about like the messiness of entrepreneurship. What was my author journey like? I share a lot of different things. I'm really open that way. And I feel like that's really important, because I want to make sure that the audience that I have has access to the information that I have. And, if I can give it away for free to especially younger people or people that are starting out, I want to do that. And then I can charge corporations, big corporations that have lots of money, I can charge them a premium for showing up, because, and then that, that allows me to give away the free content the rest of the time. But, yeah. And I will say that sometimes when I don't post, and sometimes I make a decision, I'm like, you know what? I don't have time. I'm not posting today. I'm just like, I'm done with this. I can't do it. But I would say on average, I'm about 5 times a week. I'm on LinkedIn. Usually I'll do Saturdays. Sunday is my day of rest. But Saturdays is fun, and Saturdays can be, I try to make like Friday and Saturday very different than the rest of the week. The rest of the week is like business. Friday and Saturday, I try to mix it up and make it a little bit more fun / interesting. Maybe give a podcast recommendation, or just, share something funny or goofy, maybe share a Substack post or something like that. So I'm always thinking about it. I mean, like, I ain't gonna lie, like it's top of mind. It's, you don't get 15,000 plus followers on LinkedIn by just showing up sometimes, or like taking lots of days off. Like, you really have to be consistent. And yeah, and sometimes it's, one thing I'll say, and Tiffany can probably vouch for this, I never ever, in case anybody's wondering, I never ever know what's going to do well and what's not. And I'm often as surprised as the next person that something did well. And I'm like, now, how did that happen? Or like, why did that happen? I wish I knew, but like, it's super hard to crack that code. So I think being consistent is what allows you to overcome that. It's just like, I'm just going to keep showing up. I'm just going to keep putting, authentic, points of views out there. And sometimes it hits and sometimes it doesn't, but like, I'm always going to be there, doing my part.
Yeah. So one of the things that stood out to me when you first started talking was you are consistently showing up on a daily basis. And you're showing up with what you feel needs to actually be shared, right? Because I've heard diversity of content, different types of posts, different formats. Sometimes you're like Calladita showed up, right? Like sometimes, but you're like, sometimes I'm intentionally withholding information because maybe you need a little bit more reflection time before you put that content out there. So, but what I heard was like you're consistently showing up on a daily basis, and that doesn't necessarily mean posting every day. That just means showing up with the frame of mind that like I can potentially be a resource in the instance that there's an opportunity to be. And I absolutely love that. That's kind of, thank you for sharing that perspective. Tiffany, I would love to understand your perspective on consistency as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that you have both of us on this session, because I don't plan anything. And I'll share that in July of 2020, it was the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act that month. And so I said, every single day this month, I'm going to post about a disability advocate that I admire. And I think I'm still recovering from that. It was like a self-imposed, I'm going to do that. And after I did that, I said, I know that I am not the type of person to place that level of pressure on myself to post on a marketing funnel, right? These platforms are free marketing platforms, shared space for everyone. So part of my consistency is a little bit of grace and compassion, that I'm not going to have a hot take on everything, or I might not have something to say every single day. I do notice sometimes I'll go onto LinkedIn and I'll be like, "Ooh, my last post was 4 or 5 days ago. Let me see if I can think of anything." And then, similar to Hadi, on the weekends, I'll probably share more of a personal update. But most of it is in the moment. I do have friends who spend Sundays, planning their posts and scheduling them for the week. But for me, it's really more spontaneous, which I think ties into my own authenticity, which is, if I have nothing of note that I want to share at that particular point in time, then okay. And I will also share, outside of that July 2020, I got to meet Xandra as part of this LinkedIn Creator Accelerator program in 2021, where they also asked us, I think they've asked us to post around 4 or 5 times a week. And I do notice that after that, I felt exhausted. I don't know if I was burnt out, but I was definitely very tired. And it took a couple of months for me to feel like I was back in my rhythm again. So for me, kind of doing the calendar, the scheduling, enforcing that doesn't nourish me, doesn't make me excited about wanting to create content. And I'm someone who would call myself like a side hustle creator. So it's not what I'm doing full time, and we'll probably go into this later about how it all contributes to the work that we are doing, right? The corporate engagements or getting the visibility of our book. I joke that I feel like my entire personality for the last year and a half has been an orange book cover, which is the color of my book. And so part of it, I think, similar to Hadi too, when my book was launching, I knew that I was going to gear up a little bit on the content creation. Mm-hmm. And I will share in full transparency, I'm part of a couple different creator networks. I do post on other platforms, and I'll see like my creator partner manager in those spaces, and I'll be like, "Oh, I haven't been as consistent in posting," and I'll feel a little bad. And they'll be like, "Tiffany, you wrote a book and you had to go out and market it," right? So a little bit of that grace and compassion to know, like, whatever chapter you're in your life, maybe you have more time to dedicate to content creation. And for me, I will say, at the very least, I kind of just keep an eye out that I'm posting something at least once a week. But I actually think what is more important for me is commenting on other people's posts. So yes, I want to make sure that I'm, staying relevant, but I also want to continue to build networks and relationships, because maybe I comment something really thoughtful on someone else's post, and that encourages them to come over and see what I'm posting, and maybe we start chatting from there.
Yeah, I love that you shared that at the end there, Tiffany. One of the things I've been thinking about is like recognizing when there's like a one-way conversation or one-way kind of like promotion. You have a bullhorn versus it's actually two-way conversations. And I think that that's like a very hard place to kind of break through, but it does require exactly what you just said, Tiffany, of like engagement with other people's content, engagement with what's actually the conversations that are actually taking place, inserting yourself into conversations versus just planning out a calendar and having that stuff scheduled and having it just go, right? That's like you basically have a bullhorn and you're putting out what you want to say, but you're not actually engaging in the conversation. Even I feel like it's easy to break into scheduling your posts, having it go out there, and then not even ending up in your own comments and engaging with, the people who are asking you questions about your content. So I love the two perspectives there on, I don't plan anything to all the way to like, I'm showing up every day. If there's something I can say, I'm actually going to put it out there, but also having intentional withdrawal in that so that you can balance out, what's going out there. One of the things that I wanted to just ask the two of you guys on that is, in terms of the consistency, I guess the way that you're approaching consistency, does that also ladder up to kind of just like how you're planning your career as well? And Tiffany, I'll start with you.
Yeah, what a great question. It's interesting because I have been in a couple of workshops recently around setting goals. And one goal was around work, and another was like goal setting around climbing. And it was interesting because I feel like my relationship with goals has changed over time. So I'll just share, like, it actually wasn't a goal of mine to write a book. My process into publishing my book happened kind of serendipitously, thanks to content and putting my voice out there. But I noticed, and it made me reflect on if career planning was actually limiting the opportunities that I was getting. So most recently, it was announced that I serve on the FIFA World Cup 2026 Accessibility Advisory Board. That is not something that I would have envisioned ever, right? And I actually think what's interesting about that opportunity is, and similar to the first question you asked, is it came from, Hadi and I sharing our voices, right? And so being on this accessibility advisory board, all they want from us is to share our opinions, right? And so we're seeing the opportunities kind of come in from us finding our voices and using them and sharing them on these different platforms. So younger Tiffany, the why behind my work is 9-year-old Tiffany. She is the one who had her life changed. And I am in awe of what I'm doing now. And she would not even believe that this is my life. And so I keep kind of coming back. I mean, I can't believe I have a book that has my name on it, and I don't want to lose that sense of wonder and awe when I look at my career, and when I first started at Goldman, I was in a pretty typical 2-year analyst program. You could decide to stay for a third, or some people went off to private equity and then business school. There was a very clear path. And so somewhere along the way, I want to say maybe like 10 years ago, my first career pivot was from investment banking to campus recruiting. And once I made that move, I knew I kind of broke off, and that instead of having role models, I would have possibility models. So instead of following directly in someone's roles, I would look at the possibility of all the different things of who I could become. So yeah, that's kind of like a non-answer to your question that I'm so grateful that I think because I feel alignment with what I'm doing and I feel integrity with how I'm showing up, opportunities are coming that are catapulting my career in ways I could have never imagined.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yes.
Hadi, you want to go ahead and share?
Yeah, Tiffany's story sounds really familiar, but I worked 25 years in corporate, and I was a rule follower for sure. And I was like, okay, 18 months in this role, time for promotion, check, as for my, bonus now, check, so I definitely went that path, and maybe that was like, I don't know, it aligned with me at a certain point in my life. But I feel like I've definitely reached a point in my life where I'm like, I have a tote bag and it says, yo hago lo que me da la gana, which means like, I do whatever I want to do. Like, you can't tell me what to do. I just do whatever the hell I want to do. And I feel like that's the stage, I'm in that era of my life where I don't want to follow rules. I don't want everything to be dictated. I went the hybrid publishing route that gave me optimum flexibility in terms of like who edited, who published, who illustrated. Mm-hmm. I made all those decisions. I was very intentional about how that played out. Now I get to choose the clients I want to work with, what I talk about, the topics, everything. And that is how I like it. And there's a lot of uncertainty in being an entrepreneur. And I never imagined that I would be an entrepreneur. So to your point, I never thought I would be an author, but I never thought I would be an entrepreneur because of the uncertainty involved in that. But like, I was a little bit forced into it, I feel, given the job market. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, in the beginning, I was like resentful and mad about it. And then I was like, you know what? I could do whatever the hell I want to do now. And that's nice. That's a good feeling. And to be thriving by doing whatever I want to do in the way that I want to do it, that's exciting. Like, that's really life-giving. So this has been a season, I would say, for me, that's been like a real eye-opener, doing, scary things at my age, we're in the stage of life that I'm in. Like, I never saw that coming. There's, in my book, I use a lot of sayings in Spanish to start each chapter. And there's one that says, lo que es para ti, nadie te lo quita, which is what's meant for you is not going to pass you by. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like my job is just to put myself out there, to keep connecting with people, to keep, like poking the bear and being like, hey, you want to do something together? What about this opportunity? I feel like we're really aligned. What do you think? And just keeping open and just allowing things to come in, to reach me. And that's how I prepare for receiving like whatever life is going to bring to me. It's just by staying open and staying ready and really, and, open to that, like the act of receiving, because there's a lot of stuff also that's been surprising me, that's been coming my way. And I'm just like, okay, world, go ahead, universe, send me more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is fun. And it really has been fun. And that's a value that I always had that was never a priority. Like in the corporate world, it's hard to prioritize fun, but I can prioritize it now as my own, as someone who owns my own business. And, that makes life a little bit different when you're having fun. It's, it's a whole different experience.
Thank you guys both for sharing. I really love the similar but also different perspectives on what you guys said. One of the things that really stood out to me that kind of blends what you two said was the ability to actually choose what's possible, right? So it seems like through authorship and through being open to opportunity, you both are now very much in a position where you can actually choose when opportunities land on your doorstep, whether or not that's aligned with you and how you want to kind of like move forward. And choice is something that we don't actually talk about often, right? Because a lot of times we might have chosen our career, but we didn't necessarily choose, how we ended up in a certain position or what team we landed on, right, that determined who we were sitting at tables with, that opened up other opportunities. And it sounds like the platform that you guys have each built separately is allowing more opportunities to land on your desk, that you then actually have more choice, selection, and freedom. Hadi, I think you literally said, like, I can do whatever I want, right? But that's because you have more options, right? When you have more options, you can be a little more selective and you can be intentional about like, no, this is going to bring me joy. This one, not so much, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it sounds like yes, the platforms that you ladies have built have really kind of like opened up access to those different opportunities that allows you to just go deeper into what's bringing you actually joy, which I absolutely love.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. We both wanted to add. Go ahead, Tiffany.
I want to put an asterisk in that and say, I moved into doing this full time in 2017, and it probably wasn't until 2021 that I think I started to find my stride in this space. And so before that, I was, trying to get scholarship tickets to go to conferences to network, or I was Airbnb-ing out my apartment or selling things on Craigslist. And I was on and off unemployment benefits. In 2017, I'd gotten fired. And then in 2020, if your work was impacted by the pandemic, you could reapply. And so I want to share that part of it too, because, I know we're speakers here and we're sharing like, oh, everything's great. But I do think it's also, kind of spending time in that ramp up. And sometimes, people don't have the privilege of 4 years to be able to figure out if being on their own is going to work. Right. So I just wanted to make sure I shared that part.
Yeah. And I also wanted to add some clarity and share that it wasn't a single thing that brought me to where I am. And so in the spirit of transparency, I also want to share that it was like, I was building my brand, and then I started my own company, and then I wrote a book, and then I was on a lot of podcasts. Then I got an award. Like, all these things together have brought me to where I am today. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like one single thing. So it's not just like you create content for 120 days and now you have a book deal and then you're like making $1 million a year. It's not linear in that way. And it does, it's like the bringing all of that together is what allows us to, I think if I can speak for Tiffany and myself, all those things together brought us to where we are today. And to Tiffany's point, it takes time, mm-hmm. like it's scary. It's some scary times in the beginning. And it is still some uncertain times for me right now. Like, it's not all cookies and cream, but that doesn't mean that you can't have fun with it and you can't enjoy the ride. And I know for me, my perspective changed. Like, in the beginning, I was like so nervous about everything. I was a little bit desperate or thirsty. And I feel like people sensed that. They were like, oh my God, this like person really wants to do a talk, or this person really wants to do this thing. And I feel like over time, I came into myself and I'm like, here's what I can offer you. Like, does that align with you? Because I want it to be aligned and I want to add value. And so over time, it went from like, I really want to do this thing and I'll do whatever it is. I'll speak about whatever you want me to talk about, to here's what I talk about. Here's how I think it can add value. And like, kind of being a little bit more sure, more confident, having a little bit more credibility. Obviously the book helps. And everything helps. All of the things that I've talked about, that all helps to like, now I feel like I know what I'm bringing to the table and I can stand in that.
I love that. Thank you both. I'm going to wrap. I saw one additional question in the chat, so we're going to go ahead and get to that question. But it really brings together a lot of what we were just talking about. And we talked about work, right? We talked about work, commitment, time, being in multiple different platforms, diversifying your voice. There's lots of different elements to the work that you ladies have done and are actively doing. What's the one thing that you would say keeps you going? And just like on a daily level, what's the thing that keeps you motivated, keeps you going, and keeps you pushing in the same direction? Tiffany, let's go ahead and start with you.
In some ways, I feel like two things keep me going. And one is seeing our community win. I sit across a handful of different identities who experience, whether it's bamboo ceilings or as, an Asian woman professionally, or as a disabled person, were written off from different opportunities. And so I feel like I'm a part of a cultural shift around all of these different identities I have and how they're viewed and how powerful and influential we can be. And then the second thing that keeps me going is, I call it doing the things I never thought I could do. And that's more of a personal one where, I never thought I could run a 5K or a half marathon or do a triathlon or be on the USA paraclimbing team. And more of the personal, I guess, joy and fun journey for me is also just remembering that personal journey for myself too, where it's like, we go out and we serve and we represent and we serve our communities and we do this work. But how am I making sure that I stay nourished in this work as well?
I love that.
Yeah.
Hadi, do you want to share what keeps you going?
Yeah, my why is definitely the impact that I want to have on my community. I know what I needed when I first started my career and what I didn't have. And I don't want to miss the opportunity to share what I've learned along my 25, 30-year, career. I want to share that with other people. I want for other underestimated people to have whatever advantage they can as they're navigating their career. So if there's any role that I can play in helping them move along or ascend into leadership positions sooner, with more clarity, with more confidence, then I'm going to do it. And that's my why. And that's what keeps me going every single day.
Thank you. Community, right? So it's funny. This conversation almost came full circle of like your aha moment and why you guys each started. And that is the thing. It's still a thorough line in between why you continue to show up. So I absolutely love that. One, I know that we're right at time here. So I wanted to say thank you both for sharing so openly and authentically your story, your experience. Really appreciate the gems that you ladies have dropped in today's conversation. Once again, this is Hadi Mendez and Tiffany Yu who have joined us on the No Translation show. We're going to go ahead and get wrapped up, but if anybody has any questions, we've dropped a ton of links in the comment section. We will also be following up with an email so that you can reach out to both Hadi and Tiffany if you have any questions, if you just want to follow their work that they're doing on multiple different platforms and multiple different stages. And once again, notranslation.co is where you can follow us. All the details will be in the email for everybody. Tiffany and Hadi, thank you again for joining us today. And we really just appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.